Sekou Andrews, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Good to be here, Rob.
So, it's interesting because when I heard about poetry, I thought of, some classes I took in college, or maybe some books that I've read here and there, but I've never seen anybody do what it is that you do. So I am super excited to talk about this because one of the things that we do on the show is we give people lots of different ways to experience life. And one of those, I believe, is the spoken word. So we're going to dig into all of that. But I think a great place to start with you would be to talk about where you came from and touch on your mom and touch on your dad for a second. Let's start with your dad. Your dad was a doctor. In what ways do you think that what you do now was influenced by him?
So dad wasn't a doctor. Dad was a professor. Mom has her PhD, so she's officially a doctor, but neither of them are medical doctors, just to be clear.
I read doctor. I didn't know.
So
okay, so they have their doctorate.
Right. Mom has the doctorate. And dad, both of them were professors. But it's interesting because I always say, like, I really am the apple leaning right up against the tree in so many ways. Both of my parents were educators, college professors. Both of them were artists. My mom was a dancer, choreographer. My father was a painter, sculptor, visual artist. And both of them were entrepreneurs. My mom had the first African dance company in the Bay Area. My dad had a museum dedicated to Black Olympic athletes. He was an Olympic athlete himself.
What did he compete in?
He was broad jump, long jump and broad jump, actually. Yeah.
Interesting.
So both of them were, all three of these found their way into me. And I very much am living at that intersection. If you think about my work, it really is the intersection of education, of artistry, and of entrepreneurship. And so if we're starting with my dad, his influence was heavily in support of my art, always encouraging me to think differently. The other thing to note, especially as it relates to entrepreneurs and innovators, is that both of my parents were like classic Berkeley radicals. Like I was a Berkeley baby, right? So my parents were Black revolutionaries. My mom was being hit on by Huey Newton. They were a part of Kwanzaa ceremonies when it was just the founder and 12 people in a living room, and they had us going to school unafraid to be ourselves, to wear a daishiki, to be proud of who we were. My mom shaved her head when I was young, to sort of represent her pride with African culture. Now that's sexy. Back in the 70s, look,
weird. It's crazy.
I couldn't win a clowning contest because anytime in elementary school, when somebody was like, somebody gave me a good clown and I'd give them one back, and they'd be like, that's why your mama's bald headed. You know what I mean? And so, like, I had to really, really grow up respecting how to be yourself authentically, how to own your power. And I think that showed up in what it is that I do now as an artist. And my father was a pinnacle, example and influence of that, as was my mother.
So do you, a lot of people will argue that, you don't need to go to college today. You can Google anything, but there's a couple of arguments to be made around it. And I'd love your take on this. I would assume, based on what I just heard, that they taught you how to think. Your parents taught you how to think. And when you have two professors that are not just professors for, I don't know, a local community college, but in Berkeley at that time,
that's right,
your way of looking at the world, the lens to which you see things is so completely different. Are you married now?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Do you have children?
Just have one celebrating her first birthday this Sunday.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
got a little girl. She's 6 years old.
Awesome.
So do you believe that, did you find in your wife the similar sort of critical thinking, revolutionary way thinking sort of woman, or is she different?
She's different, but has the core. She's different in the sense that she wasn't raised in the same sort of, Afrocentric Berkeley the at the heart of all protests in America in the same way that I was. But she's similar in the sense that she has the artistry and the entrepreneurship and the education. She was a makeup artist. She does decor. She worked in the entertainment industry for years. She created her own business. Now she does events and decor and design. So she has the same sort of creativity aspect. She has the same entrepreneurship aspect, and she has the same sort of independent, create yourself. Everyone said you can't do this, but to hell with everyone kind of mentality. So I love that that's where we find our synergy, even though we come from two different experiences growing up.
Now, are your parents still alive?
My mother is. She'll be flying in later on today to meet her granddaughter for the first time. So I'm
Oh
excited
my
about
God.
that. I'm
How
excited about that.
exciting.
Yeah, yeah. And my father passed right before I graduated from college, unfortunately, about a month or two before I graduated from college.
Okay. And your mom, for lack of a better word, is she still weird?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Wait,
And
listen,
I mean that with nothing but love.
absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Here's the thing. Thinking differently comes with its consequences. You know
Of
what I mean?
course,
Like, and
you get out of
so
the box, you're out of the box.
absolutely, absolutely. So there are things that, like, some of the ways even that that my wife and I have bumped heads, when she and my mom are having that classic, wife mother pissing war, right? That happens. And I have to remind, she's like, well, she's difficult with this, and this can be difficult. And I have to remind her, like, yeah, but that's who put that into me, the person that you fell in love with because of those things, right? She
Mm.
instilled that innovation. She instilled that ability to think differently, to go against the grain, all of those things. And so that you don't just turn that off. Of course, it becomes a bit more amplified when you
Oh,
start
I bet.
hitting your 70s. but
Uh,
it's that same sort of create yourself in the face of whatever anyone else is saying that you can do. That's who made me. And I have to honor and respect that. I always joke that my mom was at the forefront of everything that's sexy now. So we were doing yoga in our home and teaching yoga before yoga was everywhere, right? I grew up vegetarian before vegetarian was sexy. My mom was doing Lamaze classes back when everybody was doing Western delivery. Like everything that's sort of like, ooh, cutting edge and everyone's adopted now. My mom was at the forefront of saying, this is the right thing to do. And the world was going, nah, nah, nah. Like that's who made me. And I have to honor and respect that.
she must be having a hell of a time now with what our political climate is going through, what the vaccines are going. Like she must be like all I could tell you is this weekend's going to be very interesting at your house.
Never a more prophetic statement has been uttered.
Okay, so I want to pick up around 1998. You were working as an elementary school teacher in LA. Can you tell me more about that portion of your story?
Yeah. So I wasn't intending to be a teacher. I was actually intending to be a lawyer. I graduated from Pitzer College out here in Claremont, California. Sociology degree, pre-law. Started working in law firms. Wholeheartedly expected to go become an entertainment lawyer if I didn't make it as an entertainer. Right.
Yep.
Law was going to be my backup. and And as I started working in multiple law firms in LA, you quickly realize that law ain't a backup. Law is a commitment. The loans, the time, the overall dedication to it. And I was looking at lawyers and going like, yeah, I'm looking at the hours that they work and how hard it is, and I'm like, you got to really either love the law or just love money to do this. And I don't particularly just love the law, and I want to make money, but I want to do it at something that I love doing. And So I started to move away from that, and I also said I really want to do entertainment, and I don't want to be that entertainment attorney that's negotiating a record deal that I kind of secretly wish I had, you know,
Yep.
you know. So I was just like, let me go ahead and try entertainment, and I'd fallen in love with acting, and I'd fallen in love with music, with hip hop in particular, in middle school, and pursued it through high school and college. And so I thought, okay, let me see how I can actually start giving this a real shot. And so I stopped working in law firms. I decided to do teaching, substitute teaching, which was my kind of actor waiter job. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like
Yep. Yep.
you've got the flexibility to for actors it's to go on auditions, and for musicians it's to go on the world tour that I know is just waiting around the corner for me, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so I started doing substitute teaching. Rob, I vowed to myself that I would not become a full-time teacher because I knew I'd love it. I knew I'd be good at it, but I knew it ultimately wasn't what I wanted to do. And because I loved working with the kids, I ended up breaking that vow about a year later, and I took on a full-time teaching position, fifth grade in Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles. And it was exactly what I thought. I loved it. I was good at it, but I knew that ultimately it wasn't what I wanted to do. And as good of a teacher as I was, those kids need your 100% dedication, you know,
Yep.
and especially when you're dealing with underprivileged schools. And so I just found myself going, I can't be chasing entertainment at night. I can't be doing poetry venues and performing in shows. Like, they need my undivided attention. And so I thought better for me to step away and allow a teacher who can give that attention than to keep straddling this, you know. And so after about 4 years, I decided to quit, because during that 4 years is when I thought that I was going to open mics and doing shows to build a fan base for my hip hop music so that I could go get a record deal and become a hip hop artist. But accidentally, during that 4 years, I sort of accidentally fell in love with spoken word poetry. And I didn't expect
Interesting.
that. And so suddenly now it was like, well, damn, I'm actually excited about this, but there's an industry over here, but there's no pathway or industry. I don't know what to do with this poetry thing over here, but there's something that's actually, I've always been sort of half artist, half entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur in me was starting to get excited about the answer to that question, which is, well, go make it. Go make the industry. And if there's no industry, instead of being tossed into the sea of demos and headshots over here and everybody competing for the same crumbs. And, you know, so I always feel like there's, you know, one of my favorite quotes to give people is, if you know, when you get tired of banging your head against the wall trying to break into an industry, create the industry and make the world try to break into you. And that's what
I
I
love
decided
that.
to do,
So
you know?
you created a category that
Yeah.
didn't really exist. You noticed that there wasn't a match or a commercial career path that was very lucrative for poets.
Yeah.
So you created one. You know, we all have these hockey stick moments in our business career, and it seems like one of yours in this category was when you connected with Nike to do a Nike campaign. Can you tell me more about that and how that relationship sort of put you on the map?
Yeah. I mean, Nike was one of my first clients, and that's an amazing first client to have. I had quit my job. I had decided to do poetry full time, try to figure
Mhm.
out what that was. It's challenging because there isn't a trajectory, typically a long trajectory, not a sustainable trajectory for a spoken word poet, right? You typically start off doing clubs and cafes, and you're selling your merchandise. You're hoping you make your rent. Those start off locally, they go national, maybe they go international. And then maybe you start doing colleges where the checks get bigger. Audiences might get better, they might get suckier, but at least you walked home with a check. And then that's kind of it. You know, then you kind of either stay doing that, or you stop and you go get a job, or you publish, or you teach, or you take your skills as a wordsmith and you apply them to something else, songwriting for someone or writing for a TV show or something like that. And I just felt like that's a shame. So I found myself really trying to figure out, how can I kick open doors for spoken word poets where we get to stay on the stage just like comedians can, just like dancers or actors can. And I looked, and Nike sort of provided one of those first opportunities where I had done an MTV film called Battlegrounds for a line of street ball clothing called Battlegrounds that Nike had, and I narrated this a film that was all about sort of the theme of war and these different street ballers battling against each other for king of the court. And I narrated with these poems about war. Nike brought me to the campus headquarters and said, "Hey, we want you to do one of those poems live for our audience." And it was cool because, tennis got up there and did their traditional presentation, and then football got up there and did their traditional PowerPoint slides and everything. And then it was Battleground's turn, and I suddenly jumped up from the audience or right up behind the audience, and I was like, "I want soldiers!" And everybody was like, "Whoa!" And I did this 3-minute piece that blew everyone away, and Nike was thrilled, and the light bulb went off. And I was like, here's sort of an untapped, uncharted terrain that I can start to move spoken word into, but in a way that it can be monetized. And this is just one of the frontiers that I'll tackle. But it took a long time because the business world had, just like everyone else, they had their perception of what spoken word is, and it belongs at some, cafe or club or whatever. So it took a while for me to establish the business value. Initially, it was, hey, go write a basketball poem, or go write a little football poem, or come perform at a holiday party. And that's how businesses were approaching spoken word. You don't belong at the senior leadership meeting, but you belong at the Christmas party. And I had to keep pushing and changing the perception and the perceived value of our art form to say you're wrong. Spoken word has an incredible density to be able to hold business information and deliver it in a human way. And that will rock your senior leadership meeting. You just got to give me the chance. Eventually, I did Nike's analyst meeting, which is obviously one of their most important high value meetings. And the analysts were cheering, and Nike was like, "Wow, that's never happened before." Light bulb went off for Nike. Suddenly now I'm getting called in for brand meetings and finance meetings and PR meetings. And that really began my trajectory with creating what the speaking category that I call poetic voice that you alluded to.
This is so interesting. I want to ask you a question about this. That I'm going to fumble through the question, so just bear with me.
I'll fumble through the answer just to make you feel better.
I like writing, and a lot of people who listen to the show, they're either entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs, et cetera. And one of the things they do is they'll write a vision for what they want their life to look like in 3 years or 5 years. And then maybe it'll be followed by a vision board or something like that. Mm-hmm. And right around the time that COVID started, I decided that I wanted to write what I wanted my life to look like, because, being locked down, I was thinking about different things. Mm-hmm. And I saw myself in Italy, and I saw myself walking down the cobblestone streets and listening to the church bells ringing and blah, blah, blah. And so I started writing this. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to let that sit. I got a beautiful vision of what I want. And it was sort of poetic to me in a way. And I woke up the next morning and I looked at it and I was like, no, that's the wrong word. No, that's the wrong word. And I started just changing it. I did that, I shit you not, for about a month until I didn't have any other words I wanted to change. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, my house is in boxes now. And in 10 days, we're moving to Florence, Italy.
And that was how long ago?
Right when COVID started.
That was COVID. Wow.
So, yeah, my question for you is, you've mentioned wordsmith. Obviously, words matter. Where, and I don't even know if there is an answer to this, but where do those words come from? And how important is it for you to toil over the right word in the right moment in the right time?
Well, you're talking to a poet, so
I know.
That's all we do is toil over the right word in the right moment. We, to our own detriment, sometimes we will agonize over whether it should be yellow or canary, and we, just, it's like, I mean, we will look up and the whole project will be like, past this deadline, and we're still going canary, yellow, So you got me there. That answer is absolutely yes.
Well, you answered it. That's what it is. Yeah. You're agonizing over. Maybe the question is why? Why is it that?
Because words carry power, and that can be used as a inspirational quote for a poster behind your desk type of thing where it's just a throwaway. But if you really, really understand it and you really pay attention to it, words carry power. Like the word, whether think about this instead of thinking about it like this sort of maybe the secret law of attraction type of way, which some people might sort of dismiss as frou-frou. Think about the development of your child, right? I'm in that right now. And I'm literally getting all the research and the science and the data, learning about how, I mean, this is what I live, words carry power, and yet I'm learning about it in a completely different way as it relates to the development of my 1-year-old, and watching how something that was said to her or something that was delivered in even when she can't fully speak yet, and all we got is a mama and a dada and a dada and a dada, which I love, that you begin to recognize the neural programming that's happening with her, right? And the rewiring and the firing of her synapses and all of that stuff that is literally creating her world from the words that we use, the tonality that we use, not just what we say, but how we say it, right? Or think about it from the perspective of the words you tell yourself. How many times have you given yourself a limiting belief that you then lived into? How many times have you literally said, I can't do this. This is too hard. This is not going to happen. I'm afraid. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not beautiful enough. You're not mighty enough to be able to do this. And then you have allowed that to become your box, your silo, your barrier or boundary that you live into until you realize I need to change the words I'm telling myself. So if that applies to you inside of your own brain, what makes you think that that doesn't apply to the external world? And that's why you have to be very conscious of the words that you're using. You don't have to agonize about canary versus yellow. You can leave that to the poets, but you do have to be very conscious of the words that you're using and the power that they carry.
Yeah, think about Nike's 3 words, just do it.
Yeah. And especially when you're talking about a vision statement, because look, as much as we know, there's so much more that we don't know about how all of this cosmos works, right? And so we can sit back and go, oh, I do a vision board and I'm just doing it for fun and it seems like this thing, but you don't recognize in the same way that it's happening with my daughter and the same way that it's happening with your program, you don't recognize all of the ways that you might subconsciously, incrementally be leading yourself to the vision that you put on your board or the vision that you put on that piece of paper. And if you don't stop and actually create the vision as your compass, as your target, then you're going to journey regardless, but you might be journeying without clarity of direction.
Yeah, for sure. I want to read something to you. Indulge me, and I want to get your take on it. Okay.
Yeah.
As we stepped onto the stage, there was a long table filled with iconic faces, from Congressman Andrew Young to Sonia Sanchez. Front and center, less than 12 feet away from us, was Maya Angelou, with her chair turned around to face us, and directly behind her was Oprah Winfrey. We began our set, and much to my horror, about 2 minutes into my poem, When I Grow Up, I started to see Maya looking around, frowning, stomping her cane. And I immediately started to freak out and thinking, oh shit, I'm boring Maya Angelou. After a few more lines, however, I noticed that each stomp of her cane was accompanied by her shouting, yes, and looking around at her friends like, did you hear that? Yes. Suddenly, my freak out turned into swagger as I thought, oh shit, I'm rocking Maya Angelou. For the rest of our 13-minute set, we had the whole room lit with cheers and tears. At one point, I remember looking at the table to see Maya stomping and nudging the person next to her, while Oprah was behind her, clenching hands of the 2 people beside her and leaning forward with her mouth open and tears trickling down her cheeks. I thought in that moment, yep, I can die now. As we reached the culminating last line of our poem, because I will spit, Maya shouted, spit, with us as she jumped to her feet with her cane. She was caught by the gentleman beside her, who assisted her scurry over to give us huge bear hugs before Oprah came over and held my face in her tear-soaked hands and whispered the most heartfelt thank you I ever heard. You know anything about that guy?
You're not gonna make me cry, Rob. You're not gonna make me
Oh, I
cry.
did. I did. I was doing research and I literally walked into the kitchen. I was like, put your eggs down for a second, honey. I got to read something to you. I didn't get through it without crying. I was praying that I did this interview where I wasn't going to cry in front of you. And I did good. All I can say to you is, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, that truly was one of those, like, I can die now moments. And I love that you do your research, because it's like I can't even remember. Like, I know those were my words that I wrote, and I'm like, I can't even remember writing those.
Well, listen, you know that you've gone to the moon when you're performing for people like Barack Obama in the back of Oprah's yards. Yard. So your mother had such an impact on your life.
Yeah.
And, look, clearly, I don't know what the hell it's like to be Black. And I certainly don't know what it's like to be a Black professor in Berkeley. And I don't know what it's like at that time. Yeah. But I can certainly imagine that your mother would have said that she did something right when Barack, Maya, and Oprah are all together listening to her son. Like, how do you feel when you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, it's on multiple levels for me, because I've always had the personal artistic side of it, right? I'm an artist. You want your work to resonate. You want to inspire people. You want to move people. You want to connect. And you want to be well received. You want applause. You want record sales, whatever it is. So to have my work honored and respected by such luminaries, personally, was just like, oh my God, like I said, I can die now. To be the other context that wasn't given in that part of the story was that I was performing with my partner Steve Connell and I, and we one of our dear friends and mentors and leaders is Norman Lear, TV, legendary TV filmmaker Norman Lear. And Norman had purchased an original print of the Declaration of Independence.
I know.
Right? As millionaires do, or billionaires do, and decided he didn't want it sitting in an archive. He wanted it to tour around the country and inspire people to vote. Steve and I were the first two poets a part of that tour. So, wow. So Norman also is Maya Angelou's, Norman has two twin daughters, and their godmother is Maya Angelou. So Norman was going to the party. Yeah. So Norman was going to Maya's 75th party that Oprah throws for her every 5 years. And he brought Steve Connell and myself as his gift of poetry to Maya Angelou. So you can imagine the pressure of we are literally her birthday gift of poetry. Like, if she unwraps it and it's like, oh yeah, a toaster, like, we're dead, So the fact that she unwrapped us and literally was tear-filled, and we rocked as the gift of poetry, one of the most iconic American poets, ever, was just, it was a dream come true. So, and how were
you not pissing in your pants?
I don't know, man. Maybe it's that entrepreneur, it's that hustler in me, but I've always felt like there's always a little bit of pee, what I mean? There's a couple of drips, you know what I mean? Like, it's like the urinary tract ain't as strong in those moments as it normally is, but it's not a soak, you know what I mean? It's not a soak. And I think part of that is just because my sights are always set on big goals. So, and I stay present in the moment of achieving them. So I don't focus on them. Oh my God, what happens and what happens if, and I'm just like, listen, this is what's in front of you. You said you wanted to go after a mountain of a goal. You're here, you're on the mountain. Don't focus on anything else except getting to the top of the mountain. And so when I was in that moment, I was like, we're going to rock it. I'll tell you another quick story about that. And this is really good for your audience to know also as a lesson. The brilliance of masters. So in keeping in line with the canary and yellow joke, Steve and I, being the perfectionists that we are and loving to create original work, we spent the week. We traveled there the weekend, the few days before, and we spent maybe 3 or 4 days in a hotel, holed up, getting ready for the show. And we were like, we're gonna write an amazing set for Maya Angelou and Oprah. And we did this whole set, and we worked on it night and day. We were deliriously tired by the end of it. And Norman at the beginning had said, I think that you should do your poem When I Grow Up, Sekou, your poem I'm an American, Steve, and then your group poem, I Felt That Spit. That would be what I suggest. We were like, cool, Norman, we got this.
Yeah.
And we went and wrote this whole set. And it was the most subpar thing ever. But we presented it to Norman like, this is what we came up with. And he was like, oh, wow, some powerful stuff. That's great. So I think you should do When I Grow Up, I Am an American. And I Felt That Spit. We were like, all right, Norman, the master, we're going to go with you. And of course, that's what ended up killing. And so I always like make sure that I encourage audiences, like, know yourself. Know when you're being too precious with something. Know when you need to listen to one of your mentors. There's a big part of everything that you're hearing from me that's like, in the face of everybody telling you something, do you? But there's a flip side to that. Like, people do them to their own detriment sometimes, because you can't hear anybody, you can't take advice, you can't take leadership or guidance. So at a certain point, like, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, trust your gut, even when your gut is saying you didn't kill this, and you need to figure out a way to fix this and make it better so that you can maintain your standards of excellence. And that was one of those opportunities for us. So I think, just to answer your question quickly, like, that part of that was why we weren't necessarily pissing in our pants. We had gone through that. Then we took Norman's advice and we walked confidently on stage, knowing we were performing our 3 most signature poems that had rocked audiences around the world. And we were like, we're gonna rock Maya. So when all of a sudden we were like, oh shit, Maya's hating it, I crumbled for a minute, but I kept going, I kept dancing, I kept figuring it out. And then I realized, oh, that was my perception. I was wrong. I was perceiving my audience in a way that wasn't accurate. That was my limiting voice in my head. I'm rocking Maya Angelou. Go kill this shit. And that's how we.
You know what's amazing with somebody like Norman? My best friend growing up was on a TV show that he did called One Day at a Time. And I never got a chance to meet him, but my friends always talked lovingly about him. And we had such conversations that were interesting. You remember his show, All in the Family?
Of course.
So when you think about that show, right, he was able to take this, like, white, bigoted guy, Archie Bunker, and make all of the other white, bigoted Archie Bunkers of the world relate and hear it. But at the same time, he was teaching them. And if you want to know who Norman Lear is as a person, just listen to that story that you just told, right? And look at who he was with. So there's no arguing what his intent was because of who he was. So I love that. Speaking of, you talked about like Grammys a second ago. When we think of like, winning the Grammy, well, you did one of those. You're in that category too. We think of, household named, music stars, the Rihannas and the Jay-Z's of the world. But, you're putting spoken word on the map. In 2020, you made Grammy history by becoming the first contemporary poet to be nominated for the Best Spoken Word album in 12 years after Maya Angelou. What did that feel like in your body when you got that hit?
Yeah. Another, right up there with the Maya Oprah moment. It was another Mama, I Made It moment. So the one correction I'll give is, it really, truly, it's actually in 30 years.
Wow.
30 years. So we had to be careful with our language when I was doing the Grammy campaign, because we wanted to make sure we didn't break any solicitation rules. And Maya Angelou, some people might consider her a spoken word poet. She's not, right? She didn't win for a spoken word album. She won for narrating her book of poetry, just like all audio.
So it's right? Like a technicality there. Okay.
Right. And it's a technicality category, the best spoken word album, because we share the category with audiobooks, which means prior to the 80s, poets won that category. Spoken word poets won best spoken word album, as the world would expect. Then audiobooks became a phenomenon, shared the category. Suddenly poets were competing with presidents and giant publishers and celebrities and these huge brands, and we didn't stand a chance. So for 30 years, no spoken word poet has won our own category, which
Got it.
I felt was a terrible shame. And so as I, just like with the business world, when I started to say, okay, I need to kick open another door for poets, what's that door going to be? I started looking at the music world and I was like, we need to be able to own our category and believe this is possible. And I want poets to know that's possible. So again, I sort of put another impossible goal in front of me and decided to go for it. And I remember this moment when I was in the middle of the campaign. Everybody was looking at me like I was crazy, right? They're like, "You're gonna go for a grant? Like, what? You don't have a record label behind you? This is all your campaign money, your marketing money, your time. Like, there's no giant publisher or agent or anything behind you." And I was like, "No, I'm doing this just like I've done everything else in my career. I'm building it. You know, the hammer and the nail is in my hand." And and my mom said something. You know, the String Theory, which was the group that I did the album with, a 50-person neoclassical symphony orchestra out of Berlin in Sweden, an amazing, amazing group of musicians, an amazing collaborator. Even they were like, "Wow, that sounds amazing. You're gonna go after a Grammy. Are you sure?" You know, and even my mom at one moment was like, "That's amazing, but are you sure?"
Are you
And then
really? Yeah.
when my response to her, you know, when I said, "Yeah, here's what I'm going to do, and I know it's impossible," and she looked at me and she said, "Well, you know, you've never really been, you know, discouraged or dissuaded by chasing the impossible. So I don't see why you would start now." And when she said that, it was such a confirmation and the synergy of my past with her and everything she instilled in me, and her handing that baton and that torch to say, "Continue." And so I did. And I gave it everything that I had. And I looked up and we got the nomination. And I knew I ultimately wasn't really, really going for the win because, look, again, know thyself, know what's realistic, know when you're being, you know, delusional, but with possibility versus when you're just being crazy, right? And I knew that the Motherlode of all Motherlode books had come out that year. So of course we got beat out by a small local little known act named Michelle Obama. Not sure if you've heard of her. We weren't beating much. Becoming was like the biggest book ever. There was no way we were beating that, right? But here's the thing. And again, I encourage you all that are listening to just pay attention to how it must have felt in this moment to watch the reversal happen. I was very grateful. I had just become a voting member for the Grammys. I had been an associate member before, but that year I was moved up to a voting member. So I got to vote for my album for the first time. And I was glad that I voted on the last day of voting. And I didn't, you know, I just did that because I was busy campaigning. I was like, oh, I got to make sure I vote. But what happened was I knew I was going to be going up against Becoming and a few other celebrities. I ended up looking at that list of the celebrities that had submitted, and there were there were maybe 90 submissions or something, and about 30 or 40 of them were these massive brands. Oprah Winfrey, Deepak Chopra, Stephen Colbert, like all of these huge, huge brands, right? And so I suddenly freaked out. And I was like, oh, I made a mistake. I didn't realize this was my competition. I'll never get this. And if I had thought that or had that moment earlier, I probably would have taken myself out of the game myself. But because it was the last day of voting, it was like, I've done all the work. Oh, well, I guess I did all the work for nothing, but there's nothing I can do now. So then fast forward 3 weeks later, when I got the nomination, it was like, not only did I get the nomination, I just beat out Oprah Winfrey, Deepak Chopra, Stephen Colbert. Like, I beat out these massive brands. Little old me, the engine that could, took them out. And so that was incredibly gratifying and fortifying, that then made me go after the win. But the greatest thing about that, the same way that I was talking about the personal versus the professional side of things, for me, the Grammy, it wasn't life-changing for me. I mean, partially because, just like with everything else, like, I got hit by COVID right after, not personally hit sick, but the world got hit by COVID right after I got my nomination. So all hopes of like touring and all that kind of stuff dropped off. So it necessarily hasn't changed my personal life yet. But the goal was to fulfill my mission for my life and my purpose, which is to help to create and pioneer a more commercially viable industry for the art of spoken word, for young poets to be able to tell their parent, I want to be a spoken word poet when I grow up. And that parent hears possibility. They don't hear, you want to be homeless. They hear, oh, I know where this can go. And so the Grammys was a huge door knocked open for that. So many poets hitting me up saying, oh my God, I didn't think this was possible. Like, how did you do that? Thank you for letting me know this is even attainable. And now, not just as a result of me, I don't take full credit for it, but there is a movement happening right now where all of these other poets are jumping on board going, we're going to take back our category. And we're going to start to split the category from audiobooks. And so the access, creating a model that other poets can follow and a possibility that they can believe in, that's so much a part of my mission. So that was the biggest life-changing aspect of it for me.
If I would have whispered in your ear when you were substitute teaching back in LA, and I would have said, hey, I just want to, I've been to the future. And I'm gonna tell you that you're gonna get nominated for a Grammy, but it's not gonna be for hip hop. But you're gonna get nominated for a Grammy, and you're gonna perform for the first Black president, and you're gonna have the most famous poet in the world there, and you're also gonna have the most famous and successful woman in the world there, and they're gonna be screaming for you. What would you have said?
What do I do tomorrow to make that happen?
And what's interesting is you actually did that. You didn't know that you were doing that, but that was the path that you were on because you trusted your heart. And I think that's what you're trying to do with Stage Might. Tell me a little bit about what that is.
Oh yeah, Stage Might. So the one part of this story that we skipped over a little bit is right after I started to make strides in the business world with my traditional spoken word poetry. That's what led to me creating the category of speaking that I created. It's called Poetic Voice, and Poetic Voice is a seamless fusion of inspirational speaking and spoken word poetry. So Poetic Voice is the space that I've been living in for the past 10 years easily, especially almost exclusively in the past 10 years, really building this brand to be able to go and show organizations, stages, bookers that a spoken word based keynote speech can hold an audience, not for the 3 minutes that you thought was max, but for 30 minutes, 45, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and still leave them wanting more, because it won't just be this prose type experience where it's like, here's my PowerPoint slide and I'm going to talk about these 5 steps, but it's going to feel like Hamilton meets Ted, right? It's going to feel like this. I'm in storytelling right now, but wait, oh crap, now he's rhyming. Wait, now, oh shoot, this is business content. Let me write this down. Oh, this feels like a stand-up comedy act. Wait, why am I crying? This is an emotional story. And it constantly keeps the audience from, prevents them from getting ahead of me. And it keeps them on their toes, changing modalities, right? And so it's using all of these different art forms, primarily spoken word, but not for the sake of an entertainment performance, but for the sake of delivering public speaking and business content. And I realized that that was my unique approach to public speaking. People would always ask, how do you do that? And I used to say, well, I don't know. It's just what I was born with, it's my genius. But as I began to dissect and codify that process, I realized, no, there's, I always say, like, we talk about this is my magic, but there's a point at which the magic ends and the mastery begins. And my mastery was that I had never been trained as a public speaker, even though I had a successful career as a public speaker. I was trained as a performer, but I used that performance training and I brought it into a different industry. And I thought, well, that's unique and that's teachable. And that's something that people don't get when they go to a traditional speaker training program. Because I didn't want to be a speaker trainer, Rob. I honestly was like, that's not what I want to do. But when I realized I'm not answering the question, how do you do that effectively? Which means I'm not serving my community fully. I'm giving them inspiration, but I'm not showing them how to be inspiring to their community. So there's another step that's missing. And so I began to dissect my process, and I created a speaker inspiration training system called Stage Might, as in stage fright to stage might. And it really is rock star secrets for public speakers. It's basically saying, if you want to stand out in your communication. And this is not just speak to get paid. Like there's a lot of great speak to get paid, come learn how to be a public speaker and make $10,000 a speech, right? There's a lot of great programs for that. I didn't just want to empower people who wanted to become public speakers. I wanted to empower people who wanted to become a better dentist or a better teacher, or someone who wanted to rock a wedding speech, someone who wanted to feel empowered at the PTA meeting when they felt like they were dealing with all these judgmental parents and they had to stand up and present something. I wanted people to have regular average people to have access to a level of inspiration and dynamic communication power that they never thought was possible for them. And I realized that one way to do that is to give them the secrets of performers. How do rock star performers do what they do to you? And how can you take those secrets and apply them to your dentistry or being a lawyer or the wedding speech? And that's where it began to be sort of like, look, you want to create infectious content, Rob? Don't just learn from speakers, learn how a songwriter writes a song in a way that gets stuck in your head for a year and becomes your own personal anthem. What if you could do that with the team that you lead at work? You want to become more authentic in your body and stop feeling like there's an alien in your body every time that you get up to public speak and you start getting nervous and your leg is twitching and you're sweating and you don't feel authentically you. Well, learn how an actor plays a role. What does Jamie Foxx do to study Ray Charles, or Meryl Streep study Margaret Thatcher to the point where they become that person, and halfway through the film you forget you're looking at the actor? How do they study that person? How can on stage you study off stage you to bring the power and charisma and confidence of off stage you on stage so that you give a Grammy, Oscar winning performance of yourself? So it's really looking at dance and improv and poetry and theater and all of that in this comprehensive program to make you mighty in your communication. And most importantly, to make you mightier than your mistakes, so that you stop believing that every time that you make a mistake, you're undermining your competence or your competency, you're undermining your authority, to stop believing that perfection is your goal instead of resilience and recovery. And that's a theme that we're all living in this past season, is resilience and recovery. And I want people to feel like they are mightier than their mistakes. That was the whole principle behind it.
Listen, I need my cane right now, and I'm going to start screaming, I will spit. I will spit right now. Man. You got that thing nailed. So what does it look like in terms of the actual program? Is it modules? Is it video calls? Is it personal coaching? How do you do it?
Yeah, great question. So the most, well, put it this way, the digital version, the most flexible version is the online course. And that's what we started with. I wanted to give people a way to have this access whenever they wanted. So we have an online course. It's 5 modules, 5 weeks, very interactive, deep dive into multiple art forms and showing you how they apply to whatever type of speaking you're doing. It's got great guest interviews. I really wanted to make sure I brought in guests that live at that same kind of intersection that I do. So they aren't just an expert in, say, NLP, but they're an expert in NLP and sales and voiceover, or they're there's someone who's a mind trainer, but also a comedian and a hypnotist. There's someone who's a spoken word poet, but a public speaker. So they people that really understand the synergy of bringing something from one industry to another in a way that can help you. And so you've got the guest interviews, you've got 2 lessons inside of each course, and it's everything from rockstar rituals, how to be mighty before you even touch the stage, by learning how performers, what do performers do backstage that speakers don't do? If you go backstage to a dance concert, do you expect to see the same thing that you see backstage at a speaking event? No, dancers and performers, they're warming up their instruments and accessing their power in a completely different way. So I'm teaching those kinds of secrets and rituals, to how to memorize content masterfully and quickly, to how to be authentic in yourself, to how to be masterful on a small stage. And that was really, really important during this past year and a half, because stages went away. In-person live stages went away in the whole world. I'm in the live events business, right? And so I had to shift how it is that I deliver things, because I also had to remind people I'm not just in the live events business, I'm in the inspiration business.
what about people hiring you saying, hey, look, I don't want to go on stage, but I want my brands to have a voice and I need a story. And much the same way that you did with Nike, can brands hire you and say, look, I know what I'm trying to say. I know what our voice is, but I just can't get it out of me. I need somebody to extract that and make that work. Do you do that kind of work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's really sort of how I started,
Yep.
creating these custom pieces and these custom, there are pieces that I created. Like if we go back to Nike, there's a piece that I have that I created for that analyst meeting that I told you about at Nike. It became sort of part of the Nike archive, where everyone sort of knew about this piece and they were all like, oh my God. That's why it started to get called in by brand and finance and so forth, because everyone realized this applies to all of us. And so it sort of became this catchphrase inside of the company internally. And it's also, to be honest, it's a piece about how business relationship with consumers has changed in the digital age. They have the power, you don't, get over it. It's sort of this swagger kind of piece. Over the years, it has stayed my most used, most popular piece of content in all of my speeches. All I did was change Sidekick to BlackBerry, BlackBerry to iPhone. You know what I mean? Like the technology references changed, but the principles are still the same and still just as powerful these days. So there are definitely pieces where I'll go and create a manifesto for someone, or I'll create something that's public or internal. I just did something for MasterCard where it was like, we have a boring, dry security video that we want to do, and we want you to bring it in and humanize it and make it fun. And so I helped them create a catchphrase and deliver this really humorous, fun piece. And now they're bringing me in to deliver that live to a lot more folks in the company wide. And so I love when the pieces sort of go viral. To forgive the
Yeah. Yeah. No,
forgive the
I get
term
it.
now, but
Yeah.
they go
Yeah.
viral inside of the company and they become part of the language and the voice of that company. So I do that kind of stuff all the time in addition to my keynotes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about like Apple's campaign. I don't have it memorized, but the one I'm talking about. The here's to the dreamers, the crazy
Mhm.
ones. That like
Yep.
I think about a brand like Apple, and when that came out, that was many years ago. I
Mhm.
mean, that kind of content put them on the map.
Yeah.
So people need help with getting their brand out there, and I find that a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like, I know what I'm trying to say. I don't have the words. I don't have the skill set to be able to do it. So I think that's good. All right, last question. Everybody has a different creative process that they go through. For me, whenever I'm writing anything, I don't care if it's a blog post or whatever.
Yeah.
I got to do it in the morning. If I don't do it in the morning, like at the end of the day, like I'm just for shit. Like I don't have that bandwidth.
Yeah.
What have you found works best for you? And this question I'm going to be asking you now because you got a 1-year-old, and unless you got Oprah money, you don't have 15 nannies running around your house taking
Right.
care of your baby. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Uh-huh.
So what does that look like for you in real life to be able to find that space to create and to let it flow? Like, walk me through your process. Are you listening to music? Are you doing it in the morning? Are you doing it on the computer? Are you writing with a pencil? Are you doing it in the notebook? Paint that picture for me.
So one of the things I've been working on perpetually, and I have to use working on in air quotes, is my book. I've been working on a book about the power of inspiration and how to harness inspiration, how to access inspiration, be inspired, but also be inspiring, and teach people how to do that. Um, and it's been a challenge because, like it'd be easier if I was a chef or a construction worker working on a book. I'd work in one modality in the day and then I'd come home and I'd write. But I'm a writer. And that's how I run my company. Everything I do is writing. So by the time I'm done running the company writing, the last thing I feel like doing is looking at font at all.
Yep. Yep.
So it's been a challenge. Even just people are like, why is it taking you so long to write your book? That's what you do. And it's because that's what I do. So I've had to learn I have to constantly learn how to hack myself. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book is how to make sure that you are hacking your ability to be inspiring so that you can access it on command. When I first started off, I was just, I was writing because I wanted to write. So if I was in love, I'd write an in love poem and I'd go perform that night at the Poetry Lounge in LA or something. And if I was mad at my mom, I'd write a mad at my mom poem or something. Then all of a sudden, my art became my business. My art became my commodity. And I had to access it in a different way. Now it's like, yo, you don't have time to sit and wait for it. You got to deliver this diabetes, cloud computing, cybersecurity poem by Friday. You know what I mean?
Get creative, go.
Right, exactly. So I had to learn now. I couldn't sit around and wait for it. I had to learn how to go crowbar inspiration out of the world, right? And so and there's no one way to do that. So a lot of what I talk about in my book is to just pay attention. The first thing to do is to pay attention to how you are inspired. To be inspiring, one of the things you have to do is to be inspired. And you want to make sure that you're paying attention to that really inspired me. And you're jotting that down and you're making a mental note of what were the circumstances that allowed that to happen, because you need to be able to recreate that, So I start noticing that, say, for example, I'm very conscious of things like energy and sound and light, space, right? There are certain phases of my writing that I know I need to walk. Because I need to walk or drive. I tell my wife all the time, yo, I'm going out for a writing walk or a writing drive, because there's something about movement that gets me moving, that gets the ideas moving. I remember asking my dad years ago, why is it that I can freestyle rap whenever I'm driving? And he was like, think about how many things your brain is doing when you're driving. You're not in a sense of stasis. You're constantly looking, checking mirrors and checking all these senses, and it's a life or death. So your synapses are firing, and that's cracking open the door for your creativity, right? So pay attention to those types of things. There are other situations where I go, I need to be in stillness. I need to be in darkness. I need to be in a well-lit environment. I need to be surrounded by energy. Like if I'm writing about youthfulness and playfulness, maybe I'll go to a park or something, careful, don't be the creepy dude sitting at a park. But
yeah, you're right. You don't want to be that guy.
Right, exactly. But
keep you 200 feet away.
Exactly. But just pay attention to the stimuli that you need to crowbar what it is that's coming out, right? Pay attention to not only light and sound, but pay attention to like even distractions. There are sometimes when I find myself going, I want to go and sit in the lobby of the hotel if I'm in a writing retreat, as opposed to sitting in my room quietly, because I need the news playing. Like I was recently working on my book and the Olympics was on, right? And I'm sitting back writing about powerful stories of people who accomplished amazing things. And all of a sudden, Simone Biles and everybody's on the Olympics, and I'm going, oh, I need to pause. This is inspiration saying, hey, look at me. I'm here for you. And I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to that. So I think that it's just making sure that you are capturing and capitalizing on how it is that you are inspired, so that you learn how to access that quickly. And that's going to be one of the ways that you can always stimulate yourself and pull it out quickly,
That's interesting. One of the things that I noticed, I did 4 months living in Italy, and I looked back. My wife had asked me a question on something. She said, you wrote something in a post on Facebook when you were living in Italy that was really profound. Can you find it? So I did. I found it. And then I started looking through that period. And I was like, holy shit. I'm looking at my writing, and it's like, I'm looking, as I sit here, with my Negroni, looking at the terracotta roofs with the apricot sunlight coming. I was like, who the fuck is that guy? You know what I mean? Like it was completely different because the environment was changing me. Yeah. I mean, I felt like energetically, chemically different. And then I looked at where I am. So one of the reasons that I'm moving back there is because I feel different when I'm there. Yeah. So I love all that. Well, man, I could talk to you for hours. I know we're over our time here. Do you have any final words, suggestions, or an ask for people that are listening?
Suggestions. Ask. I guess my biggest suggestion, especially right now in this world that we're living in, don't diminish yourself. Don't diminish your possibilities right now because you feel more distant. Recognize your power to close that distance. One of the things people always ask me is, how do you control nervousness when you're on stage? And I always tell people, like, start with purpose. The higher your purpose, the less you're nervous. Because if you recognize that someone came to hear you, and you don't know who they are, and you don't know what their situation is, but someone's business or family or marriage or life or mental health might be dependent upon what it is that you have to say and how it is that you deliver it. And you might be speaking to 1,000 person, but a 1,000 person audience, but don't go into it like you're speaking to 1,000 people. Go into it like you're speaking to one person, and you may not know who they are, but they're out there, right? There's one time that I did a high school event for at-risk youth, folks that are sort of like, this is the last school you'll go to before you're put into the system. And I was talking to them. I was doing my poem, the Awesome Anthem, and inspiring them. And I was saying, look, you never know why it is that you come. So sometimes you just have to show up and give your all and live into your purpose and be okay with that. And afterwards, the audience was okay. The kids were, the reception was medium energy, but I was fine with that. And afterwards, people were lining up and they were getting autographs and pictures and so forth. And there was this little girl sitting in the corner, just waiting. And I kept looking at her like, she's not really in line. What does she want? And after everyone left, she came up to me and she just started to tell me her story and everything that had happened to her in her life. And she started to pour me. She started asking me all these questions. And I just sat with her for an hour after. And my car was waiting. And the people were like, we need to get out of here. And I was like, hold on. And after I finished, she stood up. She quietly thanked me. She gave me a hug. And she said, I was the reason why you were here today.
Whoa.
And she left. And that happens to me all the time. And it can happen to you all the time when you just recognize that that's your purpose. Don't go into it like, I got to get the investor. I got to kill the audience. This is all make or break me. Someone is listening for your voice. So always be purposeful in that. Always be mighty in how it is that you're expressing yourself. Always remember your power to be inspiring. And, let me know if I can help.
Yeah, you never know what you may say or do that'll change somebody's life. Wow. Right. Really interesting. Well, Sekou, you're the first guy I know named Sekou, so I feel like I want to keep saying it. Sekou, thank you so much for being on the show. We will link everything up in the show notes.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Rob.